Welcome back to Midnight Oil, the show where we explore the stories behind the things we love. I'm Keeg.
And I'm Tab. Tonight, we're diving into a topic that has shaped entertainment, technology, and culture for decades: the history and evolution of video games.
From the earliest experiments with pixels to the massive industry we know today, video games have come a long way. But how did we get here?
We're breaking it all down, from the golden age of arcades to the rise of home consoles, the gaming booms, and the innovations that shaped the industry.
And here's a little teaser, a little brain scratcher. What do you think the first ever video game was? Tab's about to tell us.
Yeah, so let's start at the very beginning. Before we had consoles, arcades, or even the idea of video games as any form of entertainment, there were a few pioneering experiments that laid the foundation for everything we know today. One of the very first examples of a video game, or at least something close to it, was Tennis for Two. It was created in 1958 by physicist William Higginbotham. Now, this wasn't something you could buy or even find in an arcade. It was built on an oscilloscope, which is a piece of lab equipment used to measure electric signals. But instead of measuring, Higginbotham turned it into an interactive game where players could knock a ball back and forth, similar to a basic version of Pong. And it wasn't made for entertainment, it was really just creative use of lab equipment. Higginbotham worked at Brookhaven National Laboratory, and he designed Tennis for Two as an interactive exhibit to show visitors how technology could be fun. It was super basic, literally just a horizontal line representing the court and a dot for the ball, but a lot of people lined up to play it.
Bro, imagine being the person that created the first video game on accident. Or I
No,
guess
literally.
like on purpose on accident. Because up until this point there were no video games. So
Yeah.
like you don't know what you did, but here we go.
Like, you're just sitting there fucking around with lab equipment one day and you're like, "Oh, what if
These are pretty
I
fun.
what if I just make a little like game out of this? Could be kind of cool." And then boom, fucking the explosion that we see years later, insane. But we get into the next big leap, which actually came in 1962 with Space War with an exclamation point. One of the first true digital computer games. Unlike Tennis for Two, which was more of a demonstration, Space War was designed purely as a game. It was created by a group of MIT students led by Steve Russell on a massive mainframe computer called the PDP 1. The game had two spaceships battling each other while avoiding the gravitational pull of a star in the center. So it was the first multiplayer space battle game. And it sounds like asteroids before asteroids.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Space
But
War.
Space War.
It's
But it
like
was
insert that scene from The Office of them doing parkour. It's just Space War. Space War. Space
I'm
War.
I'm weak. No, that's basically how it was. But it was one of the first games to introduce real-time player interaction, physics-based movement, and even strategy. The game was never sold commercially, but it spread across universities as computer science students copied and modified it on different machines.
They were pirating
Mhm.
it.
I mean, basically, yeah. They were just copying it. But here's something a little interesting that I learned. Did you know that Space War was one of the first games to be installed in an arcade style cabinet? In 1971, Nolan Bushnell, one of the two, who would later co-found Atari, helped create Computer Space, which was inspired by Space War, but it flopped because it was too complicated for casual players.
The nerds weren't around then.
I know, yeah. It was just casuals playing games.
That's crazy. Kind of leading into Atari, right? This is when arcade gaming began to make its popular rise, thus leading into Pong, 1972, which is crazy because almost 20 years before that was a very basic version of Pong, like
Yeah,
super basic. But 20 years later, we have Pong. And it was created by Atari, designed by Alan Alcorn or Alcorn, and Pong was a simplified digital version of table tennis that became the first commercially successful video game. That is crazy. Imagine if they dropped that today. People would be like, this is
dog
stupid.
shit.
Bad graphic.
What the fuck am I looking at?
Not enough polygon. But it was featured with simple addictive mechanics where players used paddles to hit a square ball because you weren't doing circles back then, back and forth. And that's crazy. That you got hours of entertainment out of that. And now I have 300 games in my Steam library. I'm like, "Oh, this game with realistic graphics is so boring." Like it's crazy. It's crazy. So the success of Pong proved that video games could be a profitable business, and that led to the arcade gaming boom. Now imagine if Pong didn't take off and people were like, this is terrible, and then never touched it again, and then we didn't have video games.
Oh my god.
But it birthed the coin operated arcade machine era, where in the early 1970s, they saw a rise of arcade cabinets that let people play video games for 1 quarter per game,
The
which
dream.
is, that's crazy. Imagine being able to just, well, I mean, some places you still can, but like now it's like 50 cents to $1
Yeah.
when you see those cabinets. I'm like, brother, I'll just buy the game. Like, I'll just buy the
Literally.
game. But following Pong's success, companies like Midway, Taito, Namco, they entered the market with games like Space Invaders. You ever heard of Space Invaders? Because I
Yeah.
sure have. 1978, it was one of the first blockbuster arcade hits, bringing in billions with a B in revenue. Billions.
They ate that up.
And then the guy we all know and love, Mr. Pac-Man from 1980, it introduced maze gameplay and character-driven design, expanding gaming beyond simple reflex-based experiences. So if you really think about it, like Pac-Man was one of the first games that had like characters, like named characters. And like that's crazy to think about, but when you think about named characters now, you think of like story games like The Last of Us. No, 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 no. Pac-Man, that was the most story you had in the 1980s. Well, 1980 specifically. We'll get to the 1980s. But the gaming became a actual business, and with the success of arcade machines led to the creation of dedicated gaming companies, shifting video games from a very niche curiosity to a full-fledged entertainment industry. and Atari, founded by Nolan Bushnell, became a leading force, setting the stage for home gaming consoles and the revolution of gaming of the late 70s, early 80s. Isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm. No, they ate that up.
They said, what if we kept making these games? And then they said, what if we added more pixels? What if we make it more complex? Oh, now you can kind of see a face chomping. Instead of there just being a little square ball, you have a little circle man where he goes, nom 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 nom, for as long as you don't die.
Yeah.
They said, eating these pixels? Now this is prime entertainment.
And it was. It fully
And
was back
it,
then. Like,
yeah, yeah, they were
today,
like,
I can't imagine being, like, that being my main game. Like, oh, you want to hop on and play Pac-Man today, bro? Like, what?
hey, you want to go to the bar? I heard they got a new Pac-Man machine. I'd love to go play it. Crazy work.
Some of me wish that would come back because, like,
Arcades are so cool.
no, yeah, the social aspect of gaming would be brought back. But I mean, we still have a social aspect of gaming. We'll get into a little bit later, but like, still, actually being there in person, being social, it's different, I feel.
Yeah, it's way different. I feel like I was kind of saying, not to get like super duper into it quite yet, but there's like a lot of different games now, and I feel like that is like a big driver because back then everyone was probably talking about Pac-Man because that was the new game. There weren't
Mm-hmm.
2,000 companies making games. There weren't indie developers really. Uh, well, I guess all of these companies at this point are kind of like indie companies, but what I'm saying is you were all talking about how to get to the next level of Pac-Man, how to get to the next level of, Zelda or whatever. So you're talking about all of these things. But now there's like millions of games or something ridiculous. Like it's hard to be able to talk to somebody about games now because not all of us have played the same games anymore. But
Mm-hmm.
back then, you definitely played Pac-Man or Space Invaders or stuff like that. So,
Yeah. And even off the back of that, like, even if you have played the same game with, like, as another person, you can just fucking Google a walkthrough nowadays.
yeah. And I think that that kind of ruined a lot of things. And now I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of variables. But that leads me into the golden age of gaming, right? That's where you know, we say we live in the golden age now, but I'll be honest, there's not a lot of innovating happening these days. But when we look at the late 70s and early 80s, arcades were becoming the heart of gaming. By the 1970s, arcades were the place to be for gamers, right? They were packed with flashing lights, 8-bit music, and the constant clatter of quarters dropping into machines. What an actual just great sound, by the way. When you
Yeah.
drop a quarter into one of those slots. Oh, I love it. I love it. And games became not just entertainment, but competitive experiences because you wanted that damn high score.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine going to like the same diner and seeing your name up there every month, month by month, day by day, not moving because you're the best. That's right.
That part.
And iconic arcade games that define the era, like I have stated, are Space Invaders and Pac Man. But here comes Donkey Kong in 1981. Introduced Mario, which was originally Jumpman, and really helped Nintendo establish itself as a serious gaming company. And then you had Galaga, Defender, Hubert. All of these brought new innovations, including advanced. This is crazy. These had advanced enemy AI, all right, in 1981. Very advanced, at least for its time. Um, but you had scrolling levels, unique gameplay styles. You had the works, and the 80s were popping off, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. because there's color, there's more pixels. It's a lot of fun. Or at least they're becoming better with the use of the pixels they have, is what I should say. And arcades are becoming a billion-dollar industry. By 1982, like the cabinets, arcade games are generating $8 billion annually. So you putting that quarter in
Jesus.
there, another quarter, you're putting part of that 8 billion in. And that was more, this is crazy, more than Hollywood movies and music industry combined at the time.
Jesus.
Yeah. And arcades became huge hangout spots where players gathered to compete, socialize, immerse themselves in game culture, all kinds of stuff. But I mean, that really leads to, like, well, what if I don't want to go out and socialize? Which I guess that's where, like, the 80s and 90s is where becoming social got different. Because that led, all of these video games kind of led to, well, what if I could just stay home and do it?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
what you're going to talk about.
that part. So, we've talked about how gaming started in labs and arcades, but now it's time to bring the action home. Enter the Atari 2600, the console that literally changed everything. Released in 1977, the Atari 2600 was one of the first widely successful home video game consoles. It wasn't the first console ever. That title actually goes to the Magnavox Odyssey, but the Atari 2600 was the system that made home gaming mainstream. Before this, people had to go to arcades to play video games, but now they could just do it at home. Now, you know, what made the 2600 such a big deal? Was it the graphics, the controllers, or was it something else altogether? Well, interestingly enough, which I didn't even know this, it was actually all about the cartridges. Before this, most home systems could only play one or a few built in games. The Atari 2600 introduced the concept of interchangeable game cartridges, meaning you could buy new games and expand your library instead of being stuck with the same ones. And that's
Mm,
fucking huge.
yeah, thus beginning the crippling video game addiction. Because it was
Yes.
hard to own multiple arcade cabinets, but these little affordable cartridges, well,
Oh,
affordable, but you have these little things that you could change in and out, thus beginning game paralysis. All right, let me tell you.
yeah. Yeah. But like that's huge for a console back in the day. Like that's really cool. But of course, that sparked a flood of new games. By the early 80s, the 2600 had a massive game library with the hits like Space Invaders, Pitfall, and Missile Command. Atari was dominating the industry, but not everyone was happy. And this is when the third party developers started showing up. Originally, only Atari was allowed to develop games for the 2600, but that changed when a group of frustrated Atari employees left the company in 1979 to start their own studio, Activision. Now that name, we know. We know that name. But they were the first ever third-party video game developer, and they proved that independent studios could make great games too. And they delivered. Activision gave us games like River Raid, Kaboom, and Pitfall, which were some of the best.
Kaboom! Sorry.
Yeah, Kaboom with an exclamation point. But those were some of the best titles on the 2600. But, Atari wasn't too happy about the competition. They actually tried to sue Activision, claiming that third party games shouldn't be allowed on their system. But alas, Activision won, and that opened the floodgates. Suddenly, tons of third party companies started making games, some good, some not so good. And that's kind of where we get into the video game crash of 1983, which I'll preface this with we covered this in a very wide detail in our midweek episode. You should definitely go give that a listen. So we're only going to briefly touch on this.
Yeah, we're gonna speed run it.
Very much so. But basically, to sum most of it up, the third party developers were sitting there making a bunch of games. Anybody that claimed they could even make a game, anybody that, thought they could make a game, could make a game. And they started releasing a bunch of low quality games. Obviously, consumers were mad, blah, 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 sha na na. But the catalysts, there's two of them, but there's one main one is the E.T. game and the Pac-Man game. Specifically, they were made for the Atari 2600. Like it was said in the midweek episode, the E.T. game was basically an unfinished game, and the Pac-Man game just simply didn't live up to the hype. And that, boom, the crash.
Boom. Big boom, but not from the Costco guys, because let me tell you, it kept getting worse. Because millions of unsold cartridges and consoles, retailers stocking the video game shelves. Oh boy, $3.2 billion down into the little toilet of video game hell. It was bad in 1983. So they went from 32 or $3.2 billion to just 100 million in 1985, which imagine you buy a stock at like $100 and then it goes down to $3. Like,
That would be horrible.
you put $1,000 into a stock and now it's worth $30. Someone's not gonna be happy, especially if you share a bank account. And a bunch of major companies just folded, man. The media declared that video games were a fad, and they just womp womp womp. Yeah, it was not a good time. Not a good time at all.
Not at all.
But what's that? The savior. Who is it? Nintendo. And Nintendo brings us the revival of video games, being the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985. After the crash of 1983, the gaming industry was on life support. Retailers lost faith, and video games were seen as a failed trend rather than a sustainable business. And here comes the launch of the NES. A Japanese company, being Nintendo, that has seen success with the Famicom, the family computer, in Japan, decided to take a massive risk by introducing it to the North American market. But instead of calling it a video game console, Nintendo rebranded the Famicom as the Nintendo Entertainment System to avoid the stigma surrounding video games. So the NES launched in test markets in 1985 in New York and California before going nationwide in 1986, essentially revitalizing and reviving gaming back from the dead. I'm super passionate about it, but it's actually crazy because as much as we shit on Nintendo, they did kind of make sure that video games didn't die.
Yeah.
If I'm being so real, that's what happened. So, W Nintendo, and that leads to the Nintendo seal of quality, which really fixed the industry's biggest problem, where they were learning from the mistakes that led to the crash. They enforced very strict quality control measures to prevent low quality shovelware games from flooding the market. So they're not putting out any ETs, all right? No ETs from Nintendo. And the SNQ, or the Nintendo Seal of Quality, was a certification that games were certified fresh basically meeting Nintendo's standards for polish and functionality, which I don't know how the newest Pokemon game got that seal of approval, but we're going to keep going. And third-party developers had to get Nintendo's approval before releasing games on the NES, preventing an oversaturated, unregulated market. This system ensured games were well designed and playable, restoring customer confidence and making gaming a trusted form of entertainment once again.
Hell yeah.
Yes! That's what I'm talking about, Nintendo! Yeah!
Get it.
Put an American flag behind my head.
Call. Oh my god.
So that was our Empire Strikes Back. But that leads into our Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. So, with the NES comes obviously the most legendary games of all time. Because it had the approval stamp. So, of course, yeah. Super Mario Bros. Boom. This game wasn't just a hit, it was a revolution. It brought smooth side scrolling gameplay, tight controls, and creative level designs, setting a new standard for what gaming could be. But Super Mario Bros. Wasn't alone. Nintendo was stacking up classics like crazy. Just a year later, Nintendo dropped The Legend of Zelda, an open world adventure game that introduced players to the concept of exploration, puzzles, and non linear gameplay. It was one of
Oh!
the first games to offer a save feature, meaning players didn't have to start over every time they played, and that was a huge deal.
No more increasing electric bill from me keeping my console on during the nighttime.
Exactly. Exactly. But then came Metroid, which blended action and exploration in a sci fi world. Plus, it had one of the most famous twists in gaming history. Turns out, the badass bounty hunter you were playing. Oh, hold on. Turns out, the badass bounty hunter you were playing as was actually a woman.
Gasp!
Yes! Samus Aran. And that was mind blowing for players at the time. But Nintendo wasn't just making great games, they were defining genres and pushing the industry forward. But they weren't alone. Now enters the third party developers that were actually good and were enforcing this comeback that gaming was making. So Capcom, Konami, Squaresoft, they started making their mark too. With Nintendo's, quality control system, it meant that only approved developers could release games, and that led to some awesome partnerships. So Capcom gave us Mega Man, one of the most iconic platforming series ever. Konami brought Castlevania and Contra, delivering intense action and challenge. And then there was Squaresoft, which released the first Final Fantasy in 1987, setting the foundation for one of the greatest RPG franchises of all time. And I will say, I don't necessarily like Final Fantasy as, I guess, just the Final Fantasy franchise, but if we get into like Kingdom Hearts, now mwah, that's my baby right there.
Yeah.
That is my baby. But here's like a cute little fact that I found about Squaresoft. They actually made Final Fantasy because they thought it would be their last game. They were struggling financially, so they put absolutely everything into it, hence the name Final Fantasy. And well, obviously, as we can see today, it was not their last game. But then, that leads us, you know, with Nintendo leading the charge, the third party developers creating instant classics, the late 80s set the stage for the gaming industry we know today. And things were just getting started because the 90s brought us the biggest rivalry in gaming history: Nintendo versus Sega. Let's get into the console wars. So, the console wars of the 90s weren't just about hardware, they were about style, marketing, a battle for gaming dominance. By the late 80s, obviously Nintendo was crushing it, but then Sega entered, ringing in with Sega Genesis in 1989. Sega didn't just want to compete, they wanted to completely take Nintendo down. They were like, yo, fuck you, we're better. Point blank, period. And they did it by going after an older audience. Nintendo was still pushing family friendly titles. Sega positioned itself as a cool alternative. So Nintendo had Mario, Sega needed their own mascot. So they introduced Sonic the Hedgehog in 1991. Sonic wasn't just another platforming hero, he was fast, edgy, and designed to appeal to kids who thought Mario was too slow. And that led to one of the most aggressive marketing campaigns in gaming history. I mean, who could forget Genesis does what Nintendo don't? Like, ate them
I,
up. Like,
I
that's
mean,
actually funny.
it's so true though because some of the stuff that Nintendo was doing was really cool, but Sega was just kind of doing things that they wouldn't.
Yeah, very much that. But so Sega came out swinging with commercials that mocked Nintendo's kitty image. Their whole strategy was built around making the Genesis seem cooler, faster, and more mature. And it worked. By the early 90s, the Genesis had taken a huge bite out of Nintendo's market share. But Nintendo wasn't about to let Sega steal the spotlight. In 1991, they fired back with Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the SNES, bringing in better graphics, smoother gameplay, and of course, Super Mario World. The SNES and Genesis went head to head throughout the early 90s. The rivalry wasn't just about which console was better, it shaped the entire culture of gaming. Players picked sides. Were you Team Nintendo? Were you Team Sega? And then, boom, Mortal Kombat, which took the console wars to a whole new level. Mortal Kombat was a hit in arcades, but when it came to home consoles, there was a huge controversy. Nintendo, sticking to their family friendly image, censored the blood in the in the SNES version. But Sega, they let players enter a secret code to unlock all the gore in the Genesis version. And that decision gave Sega a massive edge. If you wanted the real Mortal Kombat, you got it on the Genesis. And that fueled Sega's bad boy reputation.
Hmm. I never really thought about it like that. I'll be honest. I was never a Sonic guy. I didn't get it.
I
I
wasn't
never.
either.
I never got it. I always thought Sonic would be a cool third 3D game, but I never liked the 2D Sonic vibe.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, I was never a fan of it. But I will say, when Mortal Kombat came out, right? I wasn't even alive yet when the first one came out.
Me
But
either.
that was game changing because there was blood, lots of blood. There was there was a lot of blood. But with Nintendo, right? There's no blood. We want to protect our kids' eyeballs. But Sega, nah.
Nah,
Don't let these kids watch. Like it was
very
bad.
that. So, you know, of course there were the console wars, but then entered, something a little bit different, something obscure. And Keeg's gonna tell you all about that.
Mm. This is where it all began. Beginning the birth in 1993 of first person shooters, you had Doom, and it was developed by ID Software, revolutionizing. And it revolutionized PC gaming by introducing the modern first person shooter genre. Its fast paced, violent gameplay made it hugely controversial, yet it became a worldwide phenomenon, where Doom was one of the first games to feature modding capabilities, allowing fans to create their own levels and content. And the early 90s saw a major shift from cartridge based consoles to CD ROM technology, allowing games to feature full motion video, voice acting, and advanced graphics. Long gone are the days of not being able to figure out what's going on your computer screen or television, because by God, did they want more goddamn pixels. You want blood? More pixels. You want motion? More pixels. They just wanted better graphics and show you what the hell is going on the screen.
Hell yeah.
And there was some groundbreaking CD-based games like Myst, 1993. The Seventh Guest, 1993. Command and Conquer, which is one that most people are probably going to know, 1995, which helped define the real-time strategy RTS genre, and thus beginning, because you're on the PC, the shift towards online gaming.
Hell yeah.
And the PC gaming has started getting huge with Doom, thus leading to the online 3D gaming modern era extravaganza palooza. Like, there's not enough words to explain how huge gaming got, but I'm gonna do my best. The PlayStation, 1994. Sony changed the industry by shifting to 3D gaming, and by the early 90s, gaming was evolving beyond 2D pixel art, and developers were pushing for 3D worlds and cinematic experiences. Sony originally partnered with Nintendo to develop a CD based add on for the SNES, actually broke off and created their own console, being the PS1 in 1994. And the PlayStation succeeded because, unlike Nintendo, which stuck with cartridges like the N64, Sony embraced the CD-ROM technology, allowing for larger, more detailed worlds, cinematic cutscenes, and full motion video for immersive storytelling. It was insane because you didn't need a computer, all you needed was the console. And Sony aggressively marketed the PlayStation as a cooler, more mature alternative Nintendo, attracting older gamers. Isn't that weird? All you have to do to be successful at this time is market yourself as more mature. Like,
Yeah.
it's really interesting, really interesting. And the cinematic gaming and storytelling became a big focus. Like, the PlayStation helped shift gaming towards cinematic storytelling with landmark titles including Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil. Y'all who play video games probably know some of those. And all of these defined, survival horror, stealth gameplay, RPGs. Like, you're getting big, you're getting huge. And the industry impact was so gigantic. The PlayStation outsold the N64 and Sega Saturn and established Sony as a major player in gaming. Also, fun little fact is that it was the first console to surpass 100 million units sold, cementing
Damn.
gaming as mainstream entertainment.
Well, hell yeah.
And that launches us into the good old 2000s.
Yes. In 2001, a new player entered the ring, Microsoft. And they weren't here to just compete. They were here to change the whole game. With the launch of the Xbox. Now, I was an Xbox kid.
Pew,
I'll
pew,
be
pew, pew,
real.
pew. I was a 360 guy, but not an Xbox.
I think we had an original Xbox, but I'm not too sure. But yeah, so Microsoft brought something new to the console world, an emphasis on online gaming and PC style experiences on home consoles. It all started with a game that defined an era, Halo Combat Evolved. And Halo wasn't just a great game, it was the reason to own Xbox. The sci fi FPS had massive levels, tight gunplay, and one of the best multiplayer modes of all time. It was basically the Doom of the new generation. And it wasn't just about the game, it was about the tech behind it. The Xbox was the first console with a built in hard drive, meaning no more memory cards. And it also had more powerful hardware than the PlayStation 2, giving developers more room to create bigger, more ambitious games. But Microsoft's real game changer came in 2002 with Xbox Live. Suddenly, console players could jump online and compete with people around the world, just like PC gamers had been doing for years. The Xbox Live wasn't actually the first online gaming service, it was the first to get it right. It had a unified system for friends list, voice chat, and matchmaking, something that PlayStation and Nintendo wouldn't match for years. And that set the stage for Halo 2 in 2004. That game redefined online multiplayer, with matchmaking that kept players in lobbies instead of kicking them out after every match. That's the model we still see in shooters today. I was a big Halo guy. I'll be
Yeah?
real. I loved Halo. I used to learn all the super jumps and oh, I was
I
big
never
into
got into
Halo.
it. I
I
think
loved
my
it.
brother and I played a little bit of Halo, but we didn't really. I never played the stories of any of them for sure.
Well, if you weren't into Halo, here we are in 2005. The Xbox 360 dropped, and then Call
Mm.
of Duty was on the rise. And online gaming had officially become the heart of multiplayer shooters. Now, I was also a big Call of Duty guy, so I
I,
mean,
I I was into Call of Duty, definitely. I
I
was.
loved some Call of Duty.
Yeah, I liked Call of Duty. It was fun. It was a good time.
Very, very fun.
But like you were saying, I'm gonna kind of steal your little Call of Duty tangent because it transitions really well into the present and future of gaming. Gaming.
I'm fucking weak at that. But yeah, so we've talked about, arcades, home consoles, online gaming, but, what came next? Well, the rise of mobile gaming came next. There were consoles and PCs, but then smartphones came into the play, all cool and good, whether you can consider a smartphone a gaming device or not, that's up for debate. And we had these games like Angry Birds in 2009. You
Oh,
know,
bro. I played some Angry Birds.
I swear. The simple mechanics, addictive gameplay, and that one perfect thing, touchscreen controls. No buttons needed, just drag and launch. It was gaming for everyone. Plus, you had it in your pocket at like all times. And then you had Candy Crush in 2012, which perfected the free to play model. The idea that you could just download the game for free, but if you wanted to play more or speed things up, you could buy in game currencies, and boom, microtransactions entered.
That was the first time I ever played Minecraft. Was
Same.
on mobile device or a tablet, I think. Up until that point, I was watching Minecraft videos in like 2011 or something. But 2009 and 10, I was playing off-brand Android Minecraft clones or something.
No, yeah. No, I feel you.
Oh,
I feel you off that. I think I eventually bought like Minecraft on my phone just so I could actually play real Minecraft, but
I think
that
I
was
did
after I
too.
got tired of playing the clones.
Yeah, no, I was so tired. I was like, Grandpa, please, I need it for my Amazon Fire Kindle.
No, yeah, literally. But,
Oh.
the boom of mobile gaming made gaming more accessible than ever. But at the same time, the opposite end of the spectrum was blowing up competitive gaming and streaming. While mobile games were bringing in casual players, esports and streaming were turning gaming into a global spectator sport. So games like League of Legends that came out in 2009 and Dota 2 in 2013 created massive competitive scenes, with tournaments pulling in millions of viewers and prize pools in the millions. And then there was Twitch. Before Twitch launched in 2011, the idea of watching other people play video games wasn't very mainstream, but suddenly gamers weren't just playing games, they were watching them like a sport. And that's when we started seeing pro gamers, streamers, and content creators become celebrities in their own right. Platforms like Twitch, YouTube Gaming, and later Kick turned gaming into entertainment. People weren't just playing Fortnite, they were watching Ninja rack up eliminations and tuning in for live events inside the game itself. Now, the Ninja mention was totally off cuff, to be so real, because I don't actually watch Ninja. I've never actually watched Ninja, but he
Tell
is
everyone
one
who
of
you're
the
watching right now. I'm
who
forcing you.
who I'm
Who are you
watching right
watching?
now.
Yep.
Right now?
Who are your big three?
Oh god. Okay.
You
Um
gotta tell them.
Tyson Nat,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
Queso,
Yep.
and Agrod. Those are my big three. If you haven't watched any of them, I recommend checking them out. They're all equally entertaining in their own respective categories.
W plug.
I swear.
On the for real though, Kai has dominated the industry. This is not a Twitch uh episode, but I will give props to Kai. He has made games entertaining, IRL streams entertaining, challenges entertaining. He's just on fire right now.
So something insane that I was actually like not necessarily monitoring, but I just like happened to see it. Um Kai and Queso were both live at the same time. Or rather, Kai was live before Queso went live. And I saw a bunch of people in Kai's chat that were like, oh, Queso's live. We'll see you later. And like a bunch of people left to go watch Queso. And they had almost the same amount of viewership, at least at the point in time that I was looking. So they're very much like, they're huge fucking streamers, but they're in like two completely separate categories.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
I think if Queso had like the want or need to go bigger, then he could blow up. But he is so much fun. I'm not a horror guy, but he is so funny to watch play horror games.
When he has to get up and
He's
walk away, I fucking cry.
I literally he gives me like a combination of like old Markiplier and PewDiePie
It's
almost.
so good.
It
It is
is
so
so
good.
good. I'm not a big Twitch watcher, but Queso is very, very funny.
Very
And
that.
I think he deserves everything that he has gotten in the past couple years. He is so funny. And he just does horror stuff. Imagine if he branched out more often. Cuz like every time he branches out, he did a Minecraft stream with Sketch and Jinxie, which was huge. That went around on TikTok forever.
He's
Like
actually like that's what he wraps the stream up with is Minecraft. So he doesn't
yeah.
just play horror, he plays like um strategy games as well. He plays a lot of like Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader kind of to start the stream, and then he jumps into a horror game, and then he winds down with Minecraft. He has like a stream schedule, I
See,
guess.
I told you Tab be watching Queso.
I swear to God, I do. Literally, as soon as he goes live like 9, 10 p.m. every day, or not every day, but like most days,
Yeah, middle
always.
of the podcast. Sorry, I gotta go.
Yeah, sorry. Hold on, queso. Sorry.
No, but he's funny. He really is funny. I That was a tangent. That'll probably whatever. But no, literally, like Twitch has become so big, and the gaming industry has become so big, and we didn't even talk about like World of Warcraft becoming an actual phenomenon, or any like
Yeah,
there's multiple things that happened in the gaming industry. We can only talk about so much in 1 hour, so
this episode will probably be a little bit longer than an hour. Well, maybe. I mean, we're about to wrap up anyway, and there's a lot to cut out, but
we'll
there's a
see.
lot to cover.
We'll see. But like you were saying, I'm gonna steal the tail end of the stuff that you were talking about with different traditional sports organizations like the NBA, the NFL, FIFA. They started getting into games and they started getting into esports, and there's so much money in the sports gaming sector. Even though I don't get it, 'cause I feel like a lot of people don't buy the games. Like I don't understand. I don't.
Yeah,
Well, like I don't know. They almost never do well on Twitch. They almost never do well. I've never watched a single sports video on YouTube ever. And I'm not like super into sports, but I feel like if it was entertaining at all, I would watch it. Because there are games that I watch that I don't particularly like, but people make them entertaining. I, you know, I just can't. But that gets into. Whoa, I almost fell out of my goddamn chair. Uh, the future of gaming, right? Do you own a like VR headset?
no.
No. So I own an Oculus Quest 2. And VR is it's been a slow burn. I will say VR's been around for a minute, like longer than I thought actually, but it's slowly gaining traction, and like especially with the Quest 3 and PSVR 2, and now you have Apple Vision Pro. These devices are pushing innovation so much, and I genuinely think that if you have an Oculus, you are going to be in a crazy space in the next 5 years, because the games on the Quest are so much fun, and the only reason I don't play them is because some of my friends that I would play with just don't have headsets. Like that's the only reason. I'm actually about to play like a D&D type game with one of my buddies here in the next couple weeks in VR, and oh my god, it looks so cool. Cuz
That's
you're
gonna be
like you
fun.
actually get to be like in the games, and I think that's where things are going to start going. Cuz we had like things like augmented reality like Pokemon Go, and it kind of proved that people wanted interactive real world gaming experiences, right? So like being able to get out and game is awesome. That's why the Nintendo DS did so well. That's why these handheld consoles like the Switch are doing so well. You're able to go out and do stuff. And tech giants like Meta, Microsoft, Apple, they're investing in this thing called the metaverse. And I won't like I won't get too into it, but they envision a very like Ready Player One type thing where it's fully virtual social gaming spaces and worlds, which I like. I think that's cool, but I also think it's terrifying. Like when I think about like the actual long-term logistics, because if they get to a point like let's say VR experiences as much innovation as the past 40, 50 years of games have innovated, but in the VR sector alone, VR games are going to be so indistinguishable from reality, it will be crazy. And I don't think a lot of people agree with that, but I think that's what's going to happen, at least in the next 10 years or something. Like, there is going to be the craziest video game experiences ever because you have the haptic feedback vest where it like puts pressure on you like when you get shot in game or and then you have like these really cool um it's almost like smell-o-vision except it there's a lot more smells and it's much more accurate. So you're going to be able to smell stuff and feel stuff and hear stuff and it's just gonna be so crazy, and then if you get one of those omnidirectional movement pads, like, I really think that VR gaming and they've been saying it for a long time, but I think you would be really stupid to think that VR is not going to go anywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you.
Um, because like we've been playing GTA Online. Imagine if we could go into GTA Online literally as our characters. Like we already do the GTA RP stuff, right? And imagine if we're able to literally insert ourselves first person, being able to independently control our hands, and you like run up to a car with your little VR controllers/hands and you like jimmy the door open, you pull someone out and you like you're on your way. Like I don't know, there's just so many capabilities. If game companies get it together, I would be surprised if there's not some sort of VR aspect to GTA 6. I would be a little surprised if there's nothing. But I really do think that if you want to have a crazy different gaming experience, get a VR headset.
Yep.
The Oculus Quest 2s are pretty cheap. They're like $150 used, maybe $200 new or something. But if you can get a Quest 3, brother, I don't own a Quest 3, but I'm going to get a Quest 3 soon because it's so clear. It is
Hmm.
literally so indistinguishable. There's this thing called pass through where you can see the real world and you can do augmented reality, virtual reality, just use them as glasses. Like there's so many things that you can do. But it also gets into cloud gaming where, you can game from the internet and I see that happening, maybe, but people don't like latency on their games. And I'm really lucky. We have like 1 gig internet or something
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like we have like a fiber internet line, and it's really crazy because I couldn't imagine the internet. Well, like web pages almost instantly load for me. 100 gigabyte game downloads in like you know 7 to 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Like I don't need more than that. The latency on any online games, I get like 10 ms latency or something. Like I'm just never gonna need more than that. So I think cloud gaming eventually will get there, but I like having physical games. I'll purposely buy games on my PlayStation or something just so I have a physical copy sometimes. Now
That's fair.
Steam has a lot of games, right? So you kind of have to do that if you want to play with your friends. But for the most part, I'm excited for the future of gaming, but I'm also terrified because of how real I think they're going to be. And that kind of leads into, you have simulation theory, you have well, they're so realistic, what are people going to do? You'll have the really strange people who like start having relationships with the AIs in games and there's going to be a lot of stuff that happens. And maybe, maybe that won't be weird. Maybe that'll be standard in 20 years. I don't know. What do I know? Fuck me. I don't know anything. I'm a little
We'll see.
goofball. Yeah, we'll see. But the future of gaming I think is bright, but also There's a lot of scary stuff. And I think it's only scary if you think about the scary stuff. Maybe it won't be as scary as I think.
We'll just have to find out.
That's right. Tune in 10 years from now.
I swear. We're doing an updated episode.
Yeah, we'll do an updated episode on January 30th of 2035. Holy shit. I can't believe we're in 2025.
That's crazy.
That is really crazy. We're getting old.
Ugh.
Want to wrap us up though?
All right. From a simple oscilloscope game to billion-dollar franchises, video games have evolved into something bigger than anyone could have imagined.
And with new technology, gaming is still changing. Whether it's VR, cloud gaming, or AI driven worlds, the future looks just as exciting as the past.
Now, it's your turn. Yes, you, listening right now. What's your favorite era of gaming? Are you an arcade fan, a console warrior, or all about the future of VR? Let us know in the comments down below, wherever you're listening, or you can find all of our social media in the description below, and you can send us a message.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Midnight Oil. Don't forget to go to the YouTube and subscribe because my little Homo sapien brain wants to see that number go up. And make sure you join the Patreon because there will be some pieces that did not make it, let me tell you, because I was a little silly goose and I thought for way too long about something funny to say during a transition, but you're not going to get to hear that unless you sign up for the Patreon. So we will see you guys for the next time we take another deep dive into the stories that shaped our world.
We have to do our Patreon shoutouts, which our very first member was Agrod/Zaid. And then we have Cameron, my partner. And then we have Dakota, Keeg's partner. And then we have Stacy, my mom.
But thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you to our Patreon members. Thank you for listening and giving us the time of day. And we are getting super serious because we went over some metrics and we are having a meltdown because I'm not seeing those numbers go up the way I want to see them go up. So now we gotta grind.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw,
Good
yeehaw, yeehaw.
night.
Nighties.